Hello, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to my series of deep dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. And here we are. Welcome, everybody. Namaste, namaste, namaste. I'm super excited, as my American friends say, because I have a dear friend sitting with us this evening, Mr. AlexanderINCHBALD, who is an extraordinary witness to the beauty of integrity and the way that you'll hear what his bio is all about in a second. So welcome to you. Of course, Alexander, as you know, is number one in a season of 12 amazing gentlemen, soul stewards. So it's going to be very exciting to see what Alexander has to reveal. And you'll see that some of the people that are coming on are acute NDE experiences. So, we have this wonderful grounded gentleman who deals with the substance of masterpiece taking place. And let me just introduce Alexander, who's sitting here smiling at us in an official capacity, as I normally do. So Alexander is on a mission to help the change makers amongst us to create their very own masterpiece. He is a founder of the Masterpiece Movement, which is a growing community of pioneers, CEOs, misfits, and rebels. Everything he creates is based on the mystical experiences aroused through painting around the world, because Alexander is a keen painter. These experiences have helped him to realize we are not passive participants in a universe beyond our control, but active creators within our own playground. Alexander is a best-selling author on a number of occasions and has worked for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Alexander lives with his family above Lake Geneva, which, of course, he's just informed me is right outside the window that you can see to the right of his wonderful head. So, Alexander, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to this deep dialogue.
Stuart, I'm genuinely touched to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Bless you. Bless you. Masterpiece movement. I'd love to start there because it rings with such a clarion call. Could you please tell us what you mean by the masterpiece movement?
Well, it's something that emerged actually really post-pandemic. So there I was traveling around the world, spending 40% of my time outside of the country. And when I say the country, I live in Switzerland. And then I was in Japan. And I was with a partner in Japan, and I was running a retreat there called the Legacy Retreat. And the Legacy Retreat is the forerunner to Masterpiece. And if you go all the way back, my background is in two things. One, it's business, and second, it's art. And it was all about helping individuals to unlock their creativity and create their legacy. And it was the beginning of March, and I was supposed to get on the plane, but I didn't. And I rang my partner in Japan, to Mami, and I said to Mami-san, I'm not coming to Japan. And she said, what do you mean you're not coming to Japan? We have 15 people coming to a hotel on Friday. I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm not coming because I know I can get there, but I don't know I can get back. And I have family here in Switzerland. And she said, well, we have 15 people coming to a hotel. I said, I know you do, and we will find a way. In fact, I'll sit in this chair and you'll stream me in, exactly like you're streaming me here around the world. You'll stream me into the hotel in Japan, and I'll get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, my time, which is about, midday your time, and I'll do the afternoon and evening sessions. She said, well, what do we do in the morning? I said, well, in the morning, you send them to the spa. She said, we can't send them to the spa. They're paying money. I said, well, why don't you do. Anyway, she said, I tell you what we'll do. We will run the morning sessions. And she did. And it became the best retreat that I'd ever been involved in. And I came back from Japan and I sent a message to one of my friends. Well, actually, at the time, he wasn't a friend. I didn't even really know him. I met him once on an island in Scotland. And I sent this message to Peter Koenig. And I said, Peter, would you join an online retreat if I ran an online retreat? Because two things had happened. One, I realized that we couldn't travel around the world. So I thought, well, what we need to do is we need to find a way of delivering what we've been delivering online. And the second thing I discovered is this was the best retreat I'd ever run. And it was because these partners in Japan had run the morning sessions. They'd run review sessions. They'd run sessions on other tools. They'd run sessions on yoga. And I thought this was incredible, that actually you could run a retreat and it not be dependent on one person. And it became, this was the best retreat I would ever run. So we ran a 4-week program, 20 days to change your world. And then we ran a 6-day program, 6 days to change your world. And we had over 50 people sign up for those. And we thought, wow, this is working. And then I said to Peter, we're gonna, and it wasn't just Peter, it was a number of different partners. I said, we're now gonna do a 10-week program. And that was the first version of Masterpiece. And we're now on the 12th cohort. The 12th cohort starts on the 6th of June. And we've done 2 cohorts in Japanese, 2.5 cohorts actually in Japanese. And over 150 people have been through Masterpiece. And the reason I call it a movement is because it's not about me. It's not about the facilitators. It's actually a community helping everyone to create their masterpiece. A bit like a forest. Like in a forest, you have trees. The trees are each focused on their own potential and they're contributing to the whole. So it's a movement. It's an ecosystem. It's a communion, a community of pioneers, thought leaders, CEOs, extraordinary individuals, each of whom are creating their own masterpiece. And we also have an offline version. So now that we can travel, we are traveling. In fact, we started traveling in 2021, so we didn't pause for long.
Wonderful. So the experience of COVID and the global pause led you into another level of creating a further masterpiece.
Yes.
For those people who are tuning in, who are unfamiliar with your work, could you go deeper into the essence of Masterpiece? Why do you feel that the substance of Masterpiece is crucial or imperative or wonderful for you to expand and live within?
I'm going to go all the way back. Let's start deep, right? It's deep dialogues. So age 16, I'm going to take you back to my school. In fact, the last talk I gave was to students at my school, and they were sitting in the art class, in the art room, just off the cloisters in a place called Oundle in Northamptonshire. And they were sitting in there as I was giving this talk online, just like this. And what happened there just over 30 years ago, 33 years ago, I think it is my father came to me and I just painted this painting. It was kind of inspired by a Monet exhibition. So it was 1990 and Monet had just exhibited in the National Gallery in London. It just had a massive exhibition. You may remember it, and it's beautiful. And I was inspired by it. And I went back and I painted this big, beautiful painting inspired by the Impressionists. And it was of a bridge. It was a bit like the bridge over at Argenteuil, if you know that one. And it had a boat in there, and it was kind of similar framing. And I painted it. And in the middle of the painting, this amazing thing happened. Like, suddenly the whole painting just vibrated at another level, and like this turquoise came out and this pink came out. And it was the first moment that I really felt that creativity had moved through me. And I couldn't describe it in that way. I didn't know what happened, but I stood back and I looked at the canvas and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so when my father came to me a few weeks later, all that was on my mind was to go to St. Martin's in the Fields in London, which is, you know, one of the best art colleges in London.
The
And he said to me,
St.
and he
Martin.
said, yeah, he said, I've just spoken to your mother and to your art teacher, and we don't think you're good enough to make enough money as a professional artist. And I was devastated. This had been my dream. This was what I wanted more than anything else in the world. And it was the same year that the Dead Poets Society came out. And you may remember that scene, you know, with Robin Williams and all the young boys in this boarding school. They stand up on their table and they say, "Captain, my captain." And it's a very, very emotional moment. If you haven't seen the film, you must watch the film. Incredible film. But I didn't have the courage to do it. I didn't have the courage to stand up to my father and say, "I am an artist. And whether you support me or not, I will become an artist." And so I stopped painting. And it wasn't just that moment, it was a series of moments. You know, if you've grown up in most Western countries, but certainly in England, in the UK, in the 1970s, art is not something that was promoted. It was not. And it still isn't in most education systems. It's intellect first. And if you're not good enough at that, then, well, art is actually what you do if you're not good enough. And this was my father's view. But it wasn't just his view, it was society's view. So I can't point the finger at him. Anyway, so what happened is I stopped painting for 14 years.
Wow.
And I went to university and studied business. And I stopped eating as well.
You stopped eating?
Pretty much stopped eating. I mean, when I say stopped, I would wake up in the morning and I would lie in bed for a split second and thought everything in the world was okay, and then remembered I would have to go and eat. And my stomach would turn over and it would fill with acid. And it would take me a long time to eat anything. Every single mouthful, I felt like I was going to run to the bathroom and be sick. And I lived like that for 5 years. Whenever I was with other people, I found it hard to eat. It was a form of bulimia. And of course, I know that you worked with someone very closely and intimately who we well know had bulimia. But at this time, it was not acceptable for anyone to admit they had bulimia. I'm not even sure whether she confessed to having bulimia at that stage, 1993, maybe just.
Just beginning to awaken, yes, because we met in 95. So it was really at the end of the 80s when she addressed it, because her malaise was diagnosed by leading psychologists. And then she began the revolution of announcing this. And the day that she announced it, 65,000 young women called into the National Health Service requesting requesting help and assistance. But back to your story.
Well, it was acceptable then for women, but for a man, for a young man who'd just gone to university, who was in with the rugby crowd, who was supposed to drink, no, not acceptable. Not acceptable at all. Did I get access to a leading psychologist? I got access to the university general practitioner. He was wonderful, but was he able to diagnose what was going on? No, not at all. So I lived in this state for 5 years, and my solution was to drink. And I drank myself into hospital twice. So I know what it's like. I mean, I went all the way to the bottom. I was in Edinburgh. What a beautiful city! But I sat in the halls of residence and I looked out at the crags, these rocks, you know, which are up, you know, up high, and you can walk along them. And I used to look at them and wonder what it would be like to fly. What it would be like to go up there. And many people do. And of course, that's the last act that they ever make in this physical form. So I know what it's like to go all the way to the bottom. I mean, I was rock bottom. I didn't have a relationship for 5 years. I even left university. And in my first job, which I thought I really wanted, I was working in marketing. After 2 years on this marketing training scheme, they said to me, there's no job for you. They hauled me into the HR office. They said, we're not going to give you a job after the training scheme. I said, why not? They said, well, when we look at your grades, you're not creative enough. So here's a boy of 16 and a man of 26. And somewhere along the way, this whole journey has gone off the rails. And therein is the karmic wound, the core wound, suppressing creativity. I would disagree with Sir Ken Robinson when he said in that most famous TED talk, or asked the question, do schools kill creativity? And actually, I don't think he gave the title to the talk, if we're to be just to Sir Ken, the late Sir Ken. But the implication is schools can kill creativity. You can't kill creativity, but you can suppress it. You can suppress the artist inside you. So my whole life has been about suppressing it. And then when I left the UK and moved to the Alps, about unlocking it again. First of all, in myself, unleashing it, working out how to unleash it, and then working out how to unleash it in others. And so Masterpiece is my response to that. It is an antidote to anyone who has gone through anything vaguely similar to that. You don't have to go right to the edge, right to the bottom, but anyone who feels that they've suppressed the artist inside them, and yet they know there's something greater in here to bring into the world. And that's what we call a masterpiece. It's something that comes from deep within. A deep, deep, deep calling. And most of us can't hear it, which is why we're not in the process of bringing it to life. And so the process is to help people go through that journey, dive all the way to the bottom again, but in a way that's safe, so that they can create.
And thereby heal the malaise.
Heal themselves first, heal those around them, their family, their relationships with their family, and then eventually find the antidote to whatever their malaise is, whatever their core wound is. And that therein lies the masterpiece. The masterpiece lies in the exact opposite of whatever the deepest wound is you've experienced in your life.
So this is beautiful. I have two questions arising out of your very touching story. So we're very moved, and I just want to encapsulate for those empaths that are listening in, an awareness of, now in hindsight, what was taking place within your solar plexus.
What a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that one before. It shut down. It shuts down. And the most obvious symptom, which is not obvious, is that the whole stomach tightens, the breath tightens, and the whole stomach is tense. So why is it that and that's impacting the solar plexus? And so you're living you're only partly living. You're barely living. You're not truly alive. The force of life, what some traditions call Kundalini or Chi, which I would call the creative force, the creative energy moving through you, is blocked. It can't move. And in my experience, it moves upwards from the base. It goes through the feet up from the base, or if you're in a cross-legged situation meditating, it goes straight into that base chakra and it moves up that way. And if the stomach is blocked, your second chakra is blocked, and third chakra, solar plexus. And therefore that whole thing just shuts down. And so where's the doorway to intuition, the doorway to creativity, the doorway to the portal into hearing anything is shut down. And as a consequence, the energy then goes up into the head. And of course we say in English, don't get a big head. But we also say, don't let it go to your head. And of course, the energy goes up to the head. So fiery, like, and it's all about mental cogitation and churning. And even many of us who've been on this journey for a long time, we don't actually tap into the coolness, the refrigerator in the belly, and we don't breathe and bring that energy up to cool the heat of the head. So all of this is blocked, and my intuition just evaporated. And of course, what that means is that you have to work much harder. So because you're only using the mind, and the mind therefore has to work 10 times harder to do everything. And then it develops, neural patterns and pathways in the brain that are based on the idea that you have to work hard, that you must do things, that you ought to do things. And that, of course, reinforces it. So you just end up with this vicious cycle where everything is up here. And this is completely, it's like you've had the bottom half of your body is lopped off. I mean, perfect for this image of me now. It's like nothing exists from here. Outwards. I mean, the body is physically there, but energetically, nothing.
Yeah. And just to relate to that gesture of talking about the frame in which we sit, it is true that we can't see your pelvis, we can't see your solar plexus, but we can hear it. We hear it in the vibration of your voice, because you take us into the depth of the experience. And so your voice is resonating through the whole of your feeling aperture, so to speak.
Yes.
So you hear it. And that's into the magic, dare I say, of what I'm offering the world to save us from the digitalization of our consciousness, which of course we hear in our peoples in the West, particularly. I've just been in Egypt, where the heart and the belly is very focused on. And although, there are many aspects of suppression as a result of the politicization of Islam, the fact is that I've spent 3 weeks listening to gut sounds. Whereas if I go back into my connection in America, everything is becoming really digitalized. And this is not to lampoon or to criticize or to be unfortunate in relation to my American friends and clients. It's just making people aware. Okay, so you've given us a key, which is powerful in the message of our creativity and how we can create a masterpiece of ourselves, which eventually is really what it's all about, isn't it? That we are extraordinary human beings, and you've given us an entry into the holistic nature. Because if we close off that inspirational root of profound creativity, then, to be crude, we're fucked. And your neurology showed you exactly where that holding was based, and because you were not allowed to explore your will. However, your commentary was that you received this beautiful inspirational shift of consciousness where color, texture, and tone in the canvas became otherworldly. And so for me, what I hear is that you were really touching into the inspirational roots of energy, so to speak, that the Renaissance painters were systematically, in a very disciplined and devoted way, tuning into. But of course, they felt that they had a guardian angel called a genie that was providing them with genius. And they simply opened themselves up to the flow of inspiration, inspirazione, of divine influence. Okay, beautiful, thank you. This is very moving. The second question is, how do you define creativity?
Oh, what a wonderful question. I'm just going to go back a second, and I am going to answer that question, because there's something you said about opening up this whole body, which really touched me. And I sense that many of us in this room, and I don't know how many of us are here, but I sense many of us in this room right now, and many of us who are watching this recording have experienced that transmission that you're talking about, that creativity flowing through them. And they might even be able to feel it right now in the room. They might even be able to feel something moving in their body right now. That is the creativity. So what's my best definition of it? Feel it. Right? The moment that you start describing it, you've gone into your head. Now, here's the challenge that I'm going to set for all of us, including myself. Is relatively easy when you put me on a stage and give me such a wonderful introduction like that, and you put me in front of a beautiful audience, and I put on my glad rags and all the rest. It's very easy to tap into it. What happens when we're not here? What happens when I'm not on a mountaintop painting? What happens when I'm not in front of you or not facilitating, one of my masterpiece retreats? What happens? Because for me, the real question is, can we breathe like this when we're doing ordinary things? Can we allow the creative force to move through us in everyday actions with our partners, with our family, with our loved ones, with our colleagues, with our friends, with our community? Because it's easy to go to the top of the mountain. Like if you know Stewart, or you know me, and you're in this room, or you're watching this recording because you know one of us, you've been to the top of your mountain. You've been there. You may have been there multiple times. So the answer to creativity, you know what that is. You've experienced it. You've felt it move through you. It's the life force literally moving up and down your spine. How do we bring that into something real in the world outside? Well, it flows up, and let's say it flows out of our hands. Sculpture, painting, writing, or our voice, singing, oratory, or up into the brain. Eureka. Archimedes, Eureka, that Eureka moment when he jumps out of the bath and runs around the city naked and shouts, Eureka, I've got it. I've got the answer to this mathematical equation. So it doesn't matter where it comes out of. I mean, let's go all the way around. It's deep dialogue, so let's go down to the depth. What if it comes out of the sexual organs? Well, then you can create another masterpiece. Whether that be new life, literally the masculine, yang, feminine, yin, energy coming together. Perhaps not the right choice of words, Stewart, but you know what I mean. Literally those joining forces, from nothing, something is created. That is a masterpiece in its own right. Thus, all of us are masterpieces, or just not even actually creating something, but take the tantric, the philosophy of Tantra. Again, these two forces, the tension between these two forces. So creativity for me is the raw material. It is the energy. And the masterpiece is the physical thing which is created, or the creation is the physical thing that's created. Does that answer your question?
Totally, yes. And I'm totally with you, and I'm completely present, but I'm just reminded of the most beautiful quote, which I can't find, of course, and I'm not going to bastardize. I will send it to you later. And for those people who are listening in, unless this is it, it's here.
Of course it is.
I worked about 40 years ago with an amazing Jungian therapist, a remarkable woman who, alas, has passed into spirit and is communicating with us right now. I mean, alas, in the sense that I miss her presence. I miss her hugs. I miss the extraordinary juggling of magic that she was able to create in workshop. This is the great Marion Woodman. And she wrote this, or spoke this, and then wrote it. An artist has to be ravished by the archetypal unconscious. Otherwise, there is no art. The container has to be strong, but at the same time, highly flexible. True artists do not imagine their egos created the work of art. It came through them when they allowed themselves to be receptive.
Beautiful. Love it.
I'll send it to you later. So
I'm
you've actually
thinking
given us profound keys about how we can, if we feel ourselves to be moribund in our creativity, so we're stuck and in that sort of area of malachievement, which is very frustrating. You've given us keys of how we can come back, which of course is the glory of what the masterpiece is all about, that you're bringing to our attention. You've given us the keys about flow and about feeling ourselves to be holistically aligned and receptive to the power of the unique magic that lies within our sexuality, lies within the inner child, and lies within the dreaming and the wondering, that if we can allow ourselves to be attuned to the pure wonder and awe of what it is to be alive, and of course embrace Mother Nature, because she's feeding us with the anima mundi, with the great flow force of inspiration, inspirazione, all the time. You've given us these remarkable keys. I hope you're getting this, everybody, because this is really cute. This is really amazing. Welcome, Sarah and Nikki and Kate. I'm sure there are other people listening in. If not now, they will be in the future. Okay, cool. So this is what you get up to in your work.
I'm going to build on that quote just for a second. If you forgive me for a second, jumping in.
No, please do.
There is a stage beyond so there is a stage beyond the creativity flowing through you. There's a stage beyond that. And that stage beyond that is as it. So it flows through you. That's a state of flow. You become it. You fuse with the source energy and you influence any aspect of it. So there's two steps here. One is that you end up being in communion and it flows through you. But if you look at the true masters, the truly enlightened masters, they became it. They became one with it. And in that moment, they influence any aspect of it. So behind me, there's a canvas. It's a certain width and it's a certain height. It's painted of the Aletsch Glacier, the longest glacier in Europe, 23 kilometers long. But in the moment that you actually really connect with it, you can influence what's going on around it. That's where the true mastery happens. So the magic of a Michelangelo that you implicitly referred to is it didn't just flow through him, he became it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this for me is the really important distinction of true mastery. This is what the true masters do. It's a pretty high bar, I get that. But this is what the true masters do.
I mean, I feel it's quintessential what you're referring to, and was sort of implicit in the synthesization of what that quote is all about. Where I come from is the physicalization of the art form, because I train actors, was an actor and trained them for the 40 whatever years it has been. And so we need to allow ourselves to be both yielding and also dynamic in the force of our own creation. Now, in terms of our spiritual quest, I believe that what this means, what I've learned over the years, is that we're all tuning into the willfulness of our individuation process. And sometimes this means being very courageous, as you've suggested, about going deep into these karmic wounds or these elemental wounds and healing them, and thereby forgiving self and forgiving other for the perpetration of what the wound was all about, so that we then move into a transcendent union with the divine, so that our own will is actually in response to divine will.
Yes.
If we get stuck in individual will, most of the time our creativity begins to become moribund, or becomes stuck, or becomes whatever it becomes.
Yes.
Whereas if we're actually listening into the divine impulse, then it becomes something completely different. And it seems to me that that's what our next gesture is all about, in this pioneering element of bringing the wonder, as you call it, of the masterpiece, bringing this forward into how we can recognize our spirituality, not our religious self, but our spirituality in the totality of the way that we alter the fabric of our lives, and then alter the fabric of other people's lives through grace and through flow and through ease. Now I know what you're evoking. This is absolutely amazing. Well done. This is fantastic.
Well, you can observe it in the great masters. And actually, there's a clue in the Sistine Chapel to what really happens. So I don't know whether you know this about the Sistine Chapel. I don't know whether you ever seen this image, but it's worth Googling. Don't Google it now. Just trust me on this one. Like, looking at Stewart is more interesting than Googling this, but you can Google it later, right? So Google Sistine Chapel. No, actually, I'll tell you, and then you can Google it, right? I'll tell you what to Google. So
Yeah, don't Google it, people, now.
Don't Google it. You can't Google it because you don't know what to Google, right? So if you look at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, that key scene right in the middle, Adam and God, right? Genesis chapter 1, verse 7. God creates man in his image. Actually, we think Michelangelo was having a bit of a joke. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but if you look at the outline of the cloud, God, the angels in the cloud, it's actually the shape of the human brain. And it's even got the spinal cord going down. And it shows, anatomically, it shows everything perfectly. And we know that Michelangelo dissected the human body, including the human brain, from the age of 18 onwards. So we know there's enough evidence that he knew what the brain looked like. So what is he really saying? Is he really saying God created man in his image? Or is he actually saying man creates God in his mind?
Yeah.
And let's be really clear. He was, at the age of 16, he was in the Medici court speaking to people who were influential in the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation happened at almost exactly the same time as he was painting the Sistine Chapel. Look at his masterpiece before that, David. So David, oversized hands, oversized feet. Wow.
Well, we can't see the fullness of what you're describing and the pineal, but we can see the interconnectivity. And of course, their fingers aren't touching.
They aren't touching. They aren't. And so what is really happening there? What is really happening? And you can feel this. If you're an empath, if you're sensitive, you can feel this energy right now as I just do that. This is what he was tapping into. He was tapping into the God inside him. Because why did he give David, the shepherd boy who killed Goliath, why did he give him oversized hands and oversized feet? Because that was a symbol of God. It was a symbol of godness. So what is it that a true master does in the act of creation, whether they are conscious or unconscious of it? In the moment of the act of creation, every single brushstroke or blade or whatever instrument they're using, every word, every utterance out of their mouth, in the moment of its creation, is in total harmony with the universe. In other words, not God flowing through, the energy flowing through as God. That's the mastery. Now, of course, in order to get to that, blimey, there's a lot of work you have to do. And the Michelangelos of this world did it. They did it.
Yes, the fervor and the passion that you speak of was very alive during the Renaissance period, wasn't it? Before
Yes.
the machines, and therefore before the noise.
Yes. Although you can see it in other artists more recently.
Speak to it.
So I would say, I would make a distinction between a master and someone who's enlightened. I would say that the Enlightenment, there were enlightened masters. I would include Michelangelo as one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that Vincent van Gogh was a master, not enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
So in the act of creation, he had the same experience. You know, what is Starry Night? Well, it's the energy flowing through the night sky.
Mm-hmm.
What energy, you ask yourself? Well, you'd have to shift your brain waves by becoming connected to the whole in order to be able to see the energy flowing through the night sky. That's what he was able to do. I know that because I've had the similar experience. You can see the energy flowing through mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the energy flowing through things.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that you let go of the external faculty of connection to the world outside and you connect to the internal, you actually start to see the world in a very, very different way. Or take Jackson Pollock. Not enlightened, bless him, an alcoholic who drove into a tree with his lover. But in the moment of creation, he surrendered to the universe, and that energy flowed through him onto the canvas in a way that was incredibly harmonious and beautiful. Same thing, same energy, same access, same just totally absorbed by it. And those are just visual artists. Then you talk about orators. You know, what happened to Martin Luther King? Well, he threw his speech away. I have a dream. And the first time he said it, it resonated so deeply in him that he stopped his speech and just went off. Who was speaking? Who was speaking?
Is that rhetorical? Yeah, God was speaking through him. When you say he threw the speech away, what do you mean?
He didn't continue with the speech he'd
Oh,
written.
I see. No, he actually became so distracted by the moment of inspiration that he followed that. And of course, he was primed, wasn't he not, to allow himself to do that because of all the work that he'd done as a Baptist minister. And of course, right at the very core of Baptist ministry is the nature of Cowell, which is an ancient Celtic word meaning the verbal excitement that occurs through the whole instrument, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, of the individual who opens themselves up to the possibility of the potential and wonder of the divine moving through them. My job with actors or indeed with great speakers has always been that when they feel themselves going off-piste of how they can go, but allow the construct of what they were going to be presented to be somehow, the dragon's tail is always following them so that they know how to come back. And I'm sure you've learned how to do this yourself. I know I have. But I can actually be very ipso facto with this is what the super objectives are. But now let's actually look at this and going off into all sorts of different directions without being tangential, but is becoming obscure. It keeps the inspiration of the listener absolutely acutely aware. Fascinating. So this is what the masterpiece is actually all about. So you're onto something which is really profound in my acknowledgement of you, but also in the wonder of the neo-paradigm status that you're creating as a thought leader. You've referred to, but he wasn't enlightened, for example, in relation to Van Gogh. Van Gogh, and also Mr. Pollock, and we can summon a number of other artists I know. What does it mean to be enlightened for you?
Oh, I was asked this question the other day. For me, I make a distinction between the two. So let me start with mastery, and then let me come to enlightenment. Mastery is the capacity to master a field. And the field is new, never been seen before in human consciousness. So, yeah, take Claude Monet, Impressionism, not been seen before, or take Post-Impressionism, not been seen before. So it takes incredible courage to push back the boundary of human consciousness, to do something which has never been done before. That's not just mastery of the brushstroke. It's mastery of the mind, and it's mastery of the moment, the emotions in the moment of creation, in the act of creation. So mastery is in the act of creation, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, and your physical body are not distracting you from allowing that creativity to flow through. In light, and that creates a field. Impressionism, post-impressionism, the Enlightenment, romanticism, and it could be any form of innovation, right? So I've gone back 150 years, but you could bring it up to date and you could say, well, you know, there are masterpieces being created in business. Are they being created by enlightened masters, or are they being created by masters? Well, it's easier to see that. You know, for instance, a Tesla. Is Elon Musk, does he have a level of mastery to create a Tesla? I'd say so. Is he enlightened? No. Not in my humble opinion, right?
So what does that mean?
So for me, enlightenment is the capacity to access any field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or to access all of it.
When you say any field or all of it, could you perhaps define what you mean by the embrace of all fields?
Well, perhaps an easier way to describe it would be to talk about the bodies, right? So you've got the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, right? What I call the outer game. So this is the outer game, physical, emotional, and mental. We know this stuff because this is the stuff we live in most of the time. Most of us on this call are aware we have a causal body, what we would call the soul beyond space and time. We're aware there's a Buddhic body because we're aware that there was a Buddha on the planet. We're aware that there was a Christ on the planet. We're not aware that these are avatars of the same. Beyond that, there's the atmic body. Oof, what's that? Well, the atmic is the fragmentation, the first fragmentation. And then you've got the monad, the singularity. So the singularity, the beginning of time, right? The Big Bang, you know, everything goes back to zero, goes back to oneness, a sense of oneness. So we all came from this oneness. Mm-hmm. And then it fragmented into the atmic, first of all into three, which is why you get three avatars, Christ, Buddha, and one other, who I always forget. You'll probably tell me. And then it continued to fragment. And these started to create the soul families, you know, the soul lines. And we're now at 144,000. So, and by the way, this summary is, for those of you familiar with Richard Rudd's work, Gene Key 22, literally I've just summarized it from there. So if you want to go and look at it in more detail, go and read the Gene Keys, go and read Gene Key 22, all about grace. And he summarizes literally these 7 different bodies. So what's enlightenment? Well, where does enlightenment happen? Enlightenment doesn't happen by getting into the causal body. So it's not going beyond the mind and into the soul. It would have to be a stage beyond that. I believe that you'd have to get at least touching the Buddhic or somewhere between the two. Right? Now, I know that's linear. It's like, well, how does that make sense? But being able to observe the world outside. So if this is the inner game, this is the outer game, this is the world outside the physical world, the world thoughts, the world of emotions, this world out here, you would have to go back and observe from this perspective. And observing from this perspective, you would see all of this entirely differently. You'd see it kind of like, if you ever watched Matrix, did I bring the Matrix into a conversation with Michelangelo? Too late, just did. So if you've ever watched the Matrix, the kind of ones and zeros going down the screen, so you'd literally see all of it, but not just in the domain in which you'd mastered, you'd see it across all the domains. And therefore you'd see how the entire universe was created, the entire universe was formed, and you'd see through everything in every moment. That to me is a state of enlightenment.
So if you could embrace all of that wonder, that cosmology in human terms, and particularly within the evolutionary process of where we are now, in your experience, in your perception, how can we relate to that in the acquisition? Because we're all desirous, which is why all these wonderful people are here. We're desirous of actually finding ways, pathways to enlightenment, for enlightenment, with enlightenment, and to be embraced by it. How can we, without moving into the intellect?
Yeah. So most of us perceive that we're there, and we're not. And we know we're not, but we kind of perceive we are. And so we talk about things about, like, I'm going to get into a state of flow. Well, that by definition implies you're not, because you are it. So you can't get into a state you already are. So, and this is not me just kind of playing with words. No, you are it. And the only thing that stops you from being it is the mind.
Yes.
Well, what are the facets of the mind that stop?
The mental body.
So for me, the work that we do is looking at the mental and emotional body. And of course, Buddha's enlightenment was the same thing. It was about helping us to cut these off, because thoughts create feelings and feelings create thoughts. And this is a vicious cycle. And so his enlightenment was to say, actually, if you can observe the feelings and you can feel the feelings without creating a thought, then you're free. And all we've done in Masterpiece is integrated that essential thought and look at it in 4 different areas. And they come in pairs, if you like. So in the physical world, what are the things that tend to stop us from accessing this world? Money and time. Money and time. So money, remember that quote I said earlier from my dad? You will never make enough money as a professional artist. Money, if I had $1 for every time somebody said, oh, I can't do it, I'll do it when I have enough money.
Yes.
I wouldn't, financially, I wouldn't need to do it anymore. I'd just do it purely for love. So many people say they won't do it. Time. Oh, I don't have the time. It's not top of my priority list. I can't do it. So time reinforces money. And money reinforces time. And we get trapped in this running. And the other two are love and power. And actually, I draw it often as a dam. I call it the money dam. So we sit on one side, the money's coming in to our bank account, but the love isn't. And so our relationships are falling apart. We don't love what we do, or our body's falling apart. And you said on the other side, you've got love, but the money's not flowing in. And so you work harder and harder, but actually your relationships may still fall apart, your body may still fall apart, because actually you haven't embraced the shadow of the existing world. So how do you create the new world? Not by binning the old world. It's not how it works, because every world has been built on the previous one. So you talk about this neo paradigm, this emergent paradigm. You can't do it by getting, by kicking out the post-colonial world, by kicking out the capitalist system. We wouldn't be having this conversation without the capitalist system. YouTube wouldn't exist. Facebook wouldn't exist. Do I love them? Well, I love the fact that we can have this conversation. Do I love every aspect of them? Well, I love the fact that we can have this conversation.
Mm.
And that to me is what's important. I love the fact that you and I can have this conversation thanks to YouTube and thanks to Facebook.
And
And
thanks to Stewart as well.
of course,
Ask you to
without
come on.
you, no conversation.
Because what I'm intending to do through the nature of what we're exchanging is to create a new vibrational field of consciousness through the deepening dialogues. And it came just as your inspiration vis-a-vis COVID and the development of the Masterpiece program came about at the beginning of COVID, when I was being reached out to by people that I knew well but hadn't spoken to for a long time, and new people that were being recommended to have conversations with me. And I noticed that there was a totally new vibration about the way that we were exchanging within the circumstance of the global pause. It was deep and causative and affirmative and immensely vulnerable.
Mm.
So moving into the construct or the context of feeling is the language of the soul. So that if we move into a clarity of all our feeling states and we embrace love, unconditional love, as the key, our, our cells become suffused by so much light that we move physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually into the higher realms of the supra bodies that you've just enumerated. We missed out two, but let's not worry about that. Okay, cool. So this is the substance of what creativity is all about. Will this interview be on YouTube? Oh, yes. Anywhere, please. Absolutely. It's always going to be on recordings. Are there, before we have 2 minutes left, unfortunately. Are there any questions that anybody wants to ask? I mean, there were some wonderful comments in the chat box. I don't know if you can actually see them. Amazing. Greetings, gentlemen. Great to see and listen to you both. This is Kate. Hello, all from France. Hello, all from France. Okay, looking forward to this. Okay, so that was right at the very beginning. Anyway, people are being very affirmative about what we're talking about. So I feel there needs to be a part two, Mr. Inchbald, where we continue this conversation.
Part two, I'm in.
Maybe there need to be 3 parts so that we can actually develop it in free flow and allow the expansity of what needs to be created. Because there's something I really want to assist with the gentle thesis that we're creating. Somebody's tuning in from Brazil. Thank you. Malhaface, Malaface, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's the balance between the mind of Leonardo da Vinci and the mind of Shakespeare as masters who gave us the ability to understand the routes towards enlightenment if we were allowing ourselves to physicalize all of the wonder of what you're actually talking about. Are there any questions, anybody? Please, please. Because
He's filling. He's filling. He's waiting for questions.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Unfortunately, it takes at least 15 seconds, I believe, to write questions into the chat box. And, the glory of what's been taking place for me in observing and being present to and being in awe of the wonders of what you've been sharing with me and with all of us is the nature of the fact that there aren't any questions, because when we move into this level of clarity, that we are in flow, and so cerebralization ceases, and therefore people are really receiving very deeply the essence of, I believe, what we're engendering in this conversation. Alexander, it's come to the hour.
It has.
And I want to say to you, thank you, my friend, my brother, for sharing these remarkable feelings and thoughts, these experiences that you've had, that you took us into at the very beginning of your description of where you discovered the confusion, which I don't know if we've shared. I think we possibly did. It's very mirrored by my own story as well. Because I remember when my father said to me at the age of 15 or 16, when I was, the star in the high school drama group, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an actor. And he hit the roof. I'm not having a son of mine being an actor, 9/10 of the profession, are unemployed at any moment in time, and most of the queer, he said. He obviously had a very poor opinion of actors. And of course, there had been two actors at his dinner table the night before that I observed, and they were obviously gay, and they were obviously in a relationship. So I said, but you had two sitting at your table. Anyway, I had an immediate cuff around the ear, and that was a conversation that we never returned to. But the will within me was not bridled. The will within me was so direct that I decided that I would do it anyway. However.
Well, we're in good company, Stewart. So Michelangelo and Vincent van Gogh, both told by their fathers separately, because they didn't live at the same time, obviously, same thing. Don't be an artist. Don't be an artist. Michelangelo got a cuff around the ear, did exactly what you did, went off to the local master's studio, came back, got beaten up, got cuffed around the ear again, went back again and continued to do it, became a master, created his first masterpiece at the age of 25, lived to the age of 87.
Extraordinary.
Whereas Vincent listened to his father, like me, stopped painting for 14 years. No, not 14. 14 years. Similar thing. Started painting around the age of 30, 32, something like that. Painted for 5 years, and only in the last 2 years did he create any masterpieces. Only when he went to Provence did he create masterpieces. And I'm willing to take anyone on with the potato eaters. For me, you only call the potato eaters a masterpiece because you saw what came later. So for me, it's only the last 2 years, only in Provence. And therein lies the difference. One created masterpieces 72 years. No, my math is off. 62 years, the other for 2 years. That's the difference.
So, ladies and gentlemen, they're saying thank you, Cheryl. That's wonderful of you. Please go to www.Alexander- here we are, Ryan's putting it up on the screen, INCHBALD.com, and you will discover lots more about the wonder of Mr. Alexander Inchbald. And to you first, thank you for being with us and sharing these remarkable thoughts. And to all of you tuning in, thank you for being with us. And don't forget, go back and re-listen to the recording, because you'll hear it also in vastly different ways from the quixotic nature of these moments that we've spent with you. There will be another speaker next week. It will be Peter Panagore, who is an absolutely extraordinary American gentleman who died several times, but is still with us. So he's going to be telling us about the remarkable opportunities that death presented to him of speaking to the mind of God. Alexander, please stay where you are. Namaste, namaste, everybody, and see you next week. Ryan, thank you so much. Please stay.